All right. Okay. So I'm here in Russia helping out the Russians with a little lecture on ethics. Now, to start out with, I've got goals and purpose going to ethics. So the definition of ethics is the rationality towards the highest level of survival. The rationality, which be the reason having the highest level of survival. Like an example. So let's say you have two a teenage boy and a teenage girl. And they start having admiration for each other, and they start communicating, and their reality gets bigger, and then their affinity goes way high. And then the next thing, they say, I love you and I want to love you forever. The rationality towards the highest level of survival. They want to be together forever. Their affinity is so high. They have purpose. They have the goal. Equals ethics. But how does that couple that is so close and want to survive for so long together and have this high reasoning and high goals and high purpose, how do they get to where they hate each other? Where they don't want to even be in the same room. They don't want to see each other. They don't want to talk to each other. What happened? And that's called conditions. And they went from a high ethics condition down to confusion. And in confusion, there's no product. Nothing's happening. There's no flow of energy. There's no communication. There's no reality. It's just nothing is happening. And the person goes, how did I get here? How am I at a point now where nothing is happening? When we at one time had this tremendous love and this tremendous understanding, this tremendous ARC, this closeness, and now it's down here. Well, there's different steps down on the way to confusion that they went through. In enemy, it's the opposite of rationality towards a high level of survival. It's actually things that are against the purpose and the goals of the original togetherness, the original ethics. And enemies is like things, objects, people, groups that sought to challenge or go against the original purpose. And what was the original purpose? To love each other forever. To make children. To have a life together. But now an enemy, it's one or the other had an intention against the original purpose. So the boyfriend started, on the side dating another girl that this first girl didn't know about. So he had a withhold. He was holding back from his girlfriend. So he had the opposite of purpose, which is counter-intention, or going against the original purpose of the group. And that is an enemy. So an enemy, the formula is find out who you really are. And if you look at it with ethics being the rationality towards the highest level of survival, and goals and purpose are the two senior things in the universe, which they go together quite well. In an enemy, you're looking at the counter purpose. So now he's, instead of being together forever, he's now with another girl and he's withholding, and so their communication starts going down. The reality starts going out. Their affinity, you know, he only calls her up. Before he was calling her up 5 times a day. Now he's only calling her once every other day. So the communication is down. And then they're understanding, and then he starts fighting with his girlfriend. And then the next thing, he even goes down further to treason. And in treason, you're no longer even wearing the hat. You're no longer the boyfriend who wants to be together with the girlfriend forever with this high ethical value. Now you're at a point where you're not even wearing your hat at all. He's not even the boyfriend anymore. And then the next thing, he ends up, you know, the next slide, you know, like if he doesn't change, and with more overts and so forth, he's going to end up in this ball of mass here, this thing called confusion, where nothing really flows, no real product is happening. And it just, he really needs to find out where he is. Now, LRA says that you do a locational in the condition of treason, and you compare like where you are now to where you were at other times in the past. And I used to run it. I used to even run this on the staff members. You know, they said, "Hey, Dave, why don't you do the locational on the staff?" And so I'd say, "Okay, so now compare where you are now. You know, get really located here. Look at the walls and everything, and then compare that to another place where you were before." Now that's all fine, but when you're in confusion, your mind doesn't think so clearly as, oh, I'm here and there, and then that's going to all solve. No, it's like earlier times in the past where there was similar aberration or similar confusion. You want to actually, from a straight line from present time, go to an earlier moment where there was a confusion or an earlier upset. And then you can compare and see a thetan by comparing information of similar magnitude. This is the axioms. A thetan solves problems by compartmenting data of similar magnitude. So you now look at present time. Okay, you're in confusion in present time. Now you're comparing an earlier point where you were of similar magnitude. And by comparing those things, you're now being analytical instead of all balled up and in a confusion. So you're actually taking this confusion, and you got another confusion here, and you're comparing this time to this time. So, and here's the thetan now confronting and comparing by actually looking at and as-ising these two different times. He's actually getting to confront, and then that's how you get out of the confusion, by compartmenting data of similar magnitude. And then you can now your analytical processes can take over instead of like reactively A equals A, this time equals that time equals the other time equals the other time, and everything's all the same and everything's all confused. No. So now you're straightening out the confusion by comparing this time with this time, and then getting where now you can like look. Now you can get to confront and look. Before, when you're in confusion, you can't even look, because you're too into it. So now when after you're locational and comparing things in the environment, then you can get up to treason. And now you got to put back on your hat, because you're no longer the husband, you're no longer the mailman. Whatever the post is that you're supposed to be functioning as, you're no longer that person. So in treason, you have to put back on your hat. I am the boyfriend of Sally, right? That's my hat. That's who I am. And then an enemy, what were the purposes for being with Sally? It was having a loving relationship, for we could be together forever, and we could have these high survival goals, high communication, high understanding, high this and that. And then you can start, and then you get up to liability. What is the first thing that you did that actually got you out of the group with the girl? You know, whatever in liability. So in liability, it says, deliver an effective blow to the enemies of the group. Enemies. And that's the key word. That's the definition is in the admin dictionary. The definition of enemies. Deliver an effective blow to the enemies. And what are the enemies? The enemies are those things, groups, people, objects, drugs, whatever it is, that were challenging the original purpose, which is a high ethical level. And when the person, he went into agreement with somebody that was counterintention to his group. So he's delivering an effective blow to the enemies of the group that he's been pretending to be part of, despite personal danger. So you have to not think of yourself, you have to think of, you know, a higher level, a higher ethical level. Because when you're in liability, you are actually a handicap to the group. A liability is actually a handicap, like you're crippled. And you know, you're on a running team and you've got a broken leg, you're a liability, because you can't keep up with the rest of them. If you're in a relationship with a boyfriend or girlfriend and you're a liability, you're not keeping up with her. You can't communicate. The reality goes down. The affinity goes down. So you deliver an effective blow to the enemies of the group you're pretending to be part of, despite personal danger. And then you can start getting back into life again. You know, and maybe it was in the first place you never did the proper non-existence. You know, like I remember back in the early days, it was like, find a communication line. Oh, I'm the new registrar, and that was it. That was a non-existence formula. But then LRH came out with the expanded non-existence formula, where you really have to get on all you. So this guy. Okay, so we're going to get married now. Now I've got to talk to your grandfather, your mother and father. I've got to make agreements. And then you get your hats put on with all the people around you and all the people in your environment. And then you get out of non-existence. So, but the key thing is goals and purposes are the two things that are senior to the physical universe. And what is senior? And that equals ethics. Ethics, if you have your ethics in, you're yourself. You're a thetan in valence. A person who is out of valence is out ethics. And then he's in a lower condition. He's not himself. So what all his ethics, all of these conditions are, is like getting back to yourself in purpose, with the goal, and you've got your ethics in. And that's my lecture for today.
Do you guys need a dictionary for enemies?
No, fine.
Yeah.
You got it?
I'm willing to ask you a little bit.
Yeah, okay, so now he can ask me questions.
Yeah, and my question is, what mean the ethics on fifth dynamics, sixth dynamics,
Okay.
and seventh dynamics?
Okay, so let me go over this. Self-determinism is only the imposition of time and space across the dynamics. So I'll give you an example. Let's take the example of the sixth dynamic, matter, energy, space, and time. Let's say do you have a car?
Yeah.
Okay. Now what happens if you just put your car out in the driveway and you don't drive it for a year?
My ability slow down.
Yeah, but what about the car? What about the sixth dynamic? What happens to it?
Car maybe a little bit damaged.
Well, what about the battery?
Yeah, battery destroyed.
What about the tires? If you don't
If
you don't do anything with the car.
Yeah, I think car degraded.
Yeah, that's okay.
Here's the definition of enemies in
Yeah.
case you want to read the definition of enemies.
Okay, yeah. So, just for the sake of the demonstration here, things, this is the definition of enemies. Things, groups, other determinisms that challenged or sought to stop or refused to comply with the basic purpose became enemies or opposition. So the guy in liability going out with another girl, that he's challenged the original purpose up here. And now he's down in liability, and then he sinks down to where he doesn't have his purposes set up anymore, an enemy. Then he stops wearing his hat in treason. Then he gets down to where everything equals everything else, and it's a big ball of confusion. He's not thinking anymore. It's now, and then if you notice, up on the top is theta. Thetans naturally think in high goals and purposes and very fine thought. Down here it's very coarse and ugly. He's down here in mystery, where he's stuck and he's glued into this goo, and he can't even separate himself from his mind. So what was the question again?
My question was
I'm going to set this
what
down.
mean improve ethics or ethics on fifth.
Oh yeah. So self-determinism, you have to impose, change time and space across the dynamics. So you have an automobile. You wax the car. You check the pressure on the tires. You drive it every day. You vacuum the inside on the carpets. Change. The more change you put into something, the more time it has. The less change you put into something, the less time it has. So in ethics, you have to actually impose. The thetan imposes on the dynamic change. So on the fifth dynamic, let's say you have a house and you have walls where the paint is peeling off and like somebody's been smoking and it's brown. The floor has dirt on it. There's trash around. There's no change happening. But let's say an uptone person that has his ethics in, he comes in and he goes, "This place stinks." Okay. All right. Mops the floor, throws the trash away, sands the walls, paints, change. And then another person comes in the room and he goes, "Boy, this is a theta space."
And improvement.
Yes. Now it has ethics. Because there's goals and purposes for the room. It's just not like it's just a space where we're going to take drugs and throw our trash on the floor. Now it's a beautiful space that can be used for something. And so let's take the seventh dynamic. The seventh dynamic, you have aesthetics, music, beautiful things. Theta thoughts to another being. Admiration. So, let's say you don't practice those in your life with other thetans. Your ARC or your triangle on your dynamic is going to decrease. So when you don't pay attention to one dynamic, it affects all the other dynamics. So on the 7th dynamic, you need to practice admiration, practice going exterior, admiring beauty. So and that's something that a thetan actually can do. He can decide to do those things and put his time and attention on music and beauty and other things. And then you go down to the 1st dynamic. Now this is an interesting one. In the expanded Dianetic series, LRH does a number of CSs, case supervision directions. One of them he does where he's case supervising exchange and conditions by dynamics. It's a process. So he says clear 1st dynamic as spirit. Clear body as 5th. Now imagine that. You put your body on the 5th dynamic. 1st dynamic is thetan or spirit. So the thetan, by imposing change on the body on the 5th dynamic, change. Walking, eating correctly, vitamins, brushing teeth, mouthwash, combing hair, showers, making sure that you don't have, dirty shirts. You're putting change, and you look confident, sharp on the 5th dynamic, because you're not a thetan is not a body. So these are examples of that's self-determinism, and self-determinism is ethics, because you have goals and purpose on each dynamic, and then you can take like the 8th dynamic as well. The good definition, maybe I don't know if you know how to use this machine there, but if we can look up the definition of 8th dynamic in the admin dictionary. But anyway, that's another one that you can put attention on and put change and impose change. And when you have those high goals on each dynamic, you have ethics. And ethics is survival. And a thetan reaches across the dynamics and imposes time and space and survival across the dynamics. And it's like you just don't survive on one dynamic. You got all of your dynamics to deal with.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay. You're very welcome.
Nice concept. Very clear. Very clear.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.